I can still smell the pine smoke in this cabin, feel the heat off the fire, warm coffee in my hand. And yet my eyes keep drifting to the door, like the cold outside is listening. Out there, brothers, peace is often just a disguise. A man can leave the battlefield and still carry it home. Sometimes the silence is louder than gunfire, because silence means something is hunting. Then comes the breach. The safe zone gets tapped on the glass, not with fists, with patience. With a black SUV that idles too long outside a Milwaukee diner. Grace Holloway sat by the window with Owen Holloway, both flinching at every bell chime. My German Shepherd, Rex, didn't bark. Rex just watched, the way a guardian watches hands. So tell me, brother, when the past corners you, do you run, or do you fight and hold the line? Sit down with me. Let this play out slow, and let's pull a survival lesson from the shadow. The woman by the window. Milwaukee woke under lake wind and hard snow, the kind that stung the face and made every breath look guilty. Ethan Cole kept his shoulders squared as he crossed the sidewalk, boots finding traction on slush-polished concrete. The navy winter parka brushed his thighs, heavy with damp. Beneath it, the red and black plaid flannel warmed his chest, familiar as a habit. Faded jeans, brown leather boots, and a left knee that never let him forget the past. He didn't limp so much as move like a man who refused to give pain the satisfaction. The diner's sign buzzed above the door. A little place wedged between a laundromat and an empty storefront. Cheap coffee, hot griddle, people who didn't ask too many questions. Ethan liked that. So did his dog. Rex stepped beside him, 5 years old and all quiet control. Black along the back, tan at the legs and muzzle, ears upright, amber-brown eyes scanning without drama. Rex didn't pull. He didn't prance. He watched. When Ethan pushed the door open, warm air rolled out, carrying bacon grease, burnt toast, and the clean bite of floor cleaner. Rex paused on the threshold for half a heartbeat, reading the room like a map. Ethan felt the shift in the leashless rhythm they shared, even without words. Something's off. Ethan's own eyes followed the dog's focus. Near the window sat a woman with a boy tucked close to her side. They didn't belong to the morning crowd. Not because of clothes or posture alone, but because of the way they held themselves, like they were trying to take up less space than their bodies required. The woman looked 34, maybe 35. Slim, worn down by weeks of bad sleep. Her face was pale, with a sharp jawline, lips chapped, and eyes that kept flicking to the street as if expecting it to swing open. Her hair was chestnut brown, pulled into a messy knot that couldn't hide loose strands damp from snow. She wore a gray wool coat that had once been expensive, now creased and too light for this weather. One tell of her nature was in the way she kept her voice locked behind her teeth, polite, even in fear. The boy pressed into her side, about 8 years old, small for his age, with dark blonde hair and a serious mouth. He wore a puffy jacket 2 sizes too big and a knit cap pulled low. His hands stayed inside his sleeves like he didn't trust the world with his fingers. His eyes moved fast, watching door, window, Ethan, then back to the woman, like he was counting exits. Ethan's gut tightened. He knew that look. The look of someone waiting for a blow that hadn't landed yet. Rex didn't bark. He only stopped, head angled slightly, nose working. His tail stayed low and still. He wasn't afraid. He was measuring. Ethan slid into his usual booth, 2 tables away, close enough to see, but not close enough to corner them. His left knee twinged as he bent, sharp as a small warning. He ignored it. He was good at that, too. The waitress wasn't in yet. A few regulars hunched over coffee, shoulders rounded against the cold. A man at the counter shook salt onto eggs like he was scattering gravel. No one looked at the woman and child for more than a second. That was another kind of danger. The kind that came from people who decided not to notice. Ethan watched the window. Snow streaked sideways. Cars crawled past, tires hissing. Then he saw it. Across the street, half hidden behind a delivery van, a black SUV idled. Engine running. No hazard lights. No driver stepping out. Rex saw it too. His ears sharpened in a way Ethan had learned to trust more than his own instincts. The dog's gaze pinned to the glass, unblinking. Ethan's thoughts drifted to his own mornings, the ones when his bank account sat near zero, when the fridge looked empty, when sleep came in scraps. He wasn't rich in anything except stubbornness, but he knew what it was to be hunted by life. The woman's hands trembled as she lifted a mug. She didn't drink. She just held it, like heat was the only permission she had to stay. Ethan stood. No dramatic stride, no hero walk. Just a man moving with purpose. He stopped at the register, scanned the chalkboard menu, then ordered as if it was routine. 2 breakfasts to go. Pancakes, eggs, and toast. Extra hot chocolate in a paper cup. He paid cash and waited, hands in pockets, posture calm. Rex stayed a step behind, blocking the line of approach without making a show of it. Ethan carried the tray toward the window booth. The woman stiffened the moment he came near. The boy's shoulders rose, eyes wide, ready to bolt. Ethan kept his voice low and steady. Morning. No name, no questions. He set the tray down on the edge of their table like a mistake. They made an extra order. Happens. The woman stared at the food like it was dangerous. Like kindness always had a hook. Ethan noticed her left wrist, a faint yellowing bruise, half hidden by her sleeve. Not fresh. Old enough to be explained away. The kind people hid and smiled through. Her throat worked as she swallowed. You don't have to. I know, Ethan said. But it's cold out, and kids need fuel. The boy's gaze flicked to Rex. The dog lowered his head slightly, not submissive, just gentle. A calm invitation to breathe. The boy's fingers loosened inside his sleeves by a fraction. The woman's eyes glistened, but she didn't let tears fall. Pride and fear were holding hands inside her. I'm Grace, she said, voice careful, like she was giving a fake name even as she tried to tell the truth. Grace Holloway. Ethan nodded once, as if that was enough. Ethan. He didn't offer his last name. He didn't need to. Not yet. The boy glanced down. Owen, he whispered. Ethan leaned back a step. Not too close, not too far. A distance that said, you're safe, but you're not trapped. The diner doorbell chimed. Grace flinched hard, shoulders jerking as if someone had touched a bruise in her mind. Owen pressed against her, eyes snapping to the entrance. A man came in, late 30s, broad in the shoulders, clean-shaven, wearing a dark peacoat and leather gloves. His hair was neatly cut, his face polite, in the way a knife could be polite. He scanned the room once, quick and practiced, then let his eyes linger toward the window. Ethan felt Rex shift. Not forward, not back, just into a straighter line, a quiet wall. The man ordered coffee at the counter, voice smooth. Then he turned, as if casually, and walked 2 steps toward the tables. Grace's breath caught. She lowered her head, hair falling like a curtain. Owen's knees bounced under the table. Ethan stepped sideways, placing himself between that man and their booth, as if he'd simply decided to stand there. The man stopped. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Just looking for someone," he said. Ethan didn't move. "Keep looking somewhere else." A beat of silence. The diner seemed to hold its breath with him. The man's gaze slid to Rex. For the first time, his confidence faltered. Rex didn't bare teeth. He didn't growl. He only watched. Amber eyes steady, promise and warning in the same calm. The man's smile thinned. "No trouble," he said, and turned back toward the counter. Ethan waited until the coffee was in the man's hand, until the doorbell chimed again, until the black SUV across the street remained exactly where it was. Grace's voice came out like a thread. "Please, don't let them see my son." Ethan's jaw tightened. A familiar heat rose behind his ribs, the kind he'd learned to control overseas and at home. He looked at Grace, then at Owen, then at the street beyond the snow-streaked glass. "Tomorrow," Ethan said quietly. "Same time, same table." Grace blinked fast, trying not to cry. Ethan returned to his booth, but he didn't sit. He watched the SUV. He watched the door. He watched Rex, who watched everything. When it was time to leave, Ethan stepped outside into the biting air. Snow hit his face like thrown salt. Grace had just stood to gather Owen's coat when the black SUV across the street snapped its headlights on, the beams sweeping the diner window as if taking a picture of every face inside. Rex stared straight out at the vehicle without barking, but his body tensed as if he recognized the person behind the wheel, the routine that felt like a trap. Ethan didn't turn around when he crossed the street. He kept his pace steady, boots crunching through packed snow, navy parka zipped high against the wind off the lake. His left knee complained on the curb cut, a sharp reminder that rushing was how people got hurt. He refused to give the cold, or anyone watching, the satisfaction of seeing him flinch. Rex stayed close at his heel, black and tan coat dusted with snow, ears upright, eyes tracking the black SUV in the way only a trained dog could. No barking, no drama, just a tension that made the air feel heavier. At the corner, Ethan paused like any man waiting for the crosswalk. He didn't look back. Instead, he watched the reflection in a shop window. Headlights. A dark shape. Still there. He felt the old Navy lesson slide into place without effort. Don't stare at the threat. Don't announce you know. Build options. Reduce risk. Protect the vulnerable first. At home, his apartment smelled faintly of laundry soap and old coffee. He set his keys down quietly so he wouldn't wake anyone. Then he did what he always did when his mind wouldn't settle. He checked the locks. Once, twice. Not because he was paranoid, because he'd learned the difference between fear and preparation. The next morning, Milwaukee was colder, the kind of cold that made the world sound muted. Snow sifted down in tiny grains. Ethan went back to the diner like he'd promised. Grace and Owen were already there. They sat in the same booth by the window, but they'd shifted their positions. Grace's body angled toward the door now, not the street. Owen tucked into the corner, eyes bouncing between Ethan and the glass. Grace's gray wool coat looked even thinner in the daylight, and her hair was pulled back tighter, as if she'd tried to make herself look less noticeable. She didn't succeed. Ethan ordered before anyone could speak. 2 breakfasts, 1 extra hot chocolate. He carried the tray over and set it down like it belonged there. "Morning," he said again. calm as a metronome. Grace's mouth trembled as she tried to smile. "You came back." "I said I would." Owen watched Rex more than he watched Ethan. The boy's gaze lingered on the dog's face like he was looking for a rule he could trust. Rex lowered himself to the floor near the end of the booth, not close enough to crowd, not far enough to abandon. His eyes stayed on the entrance, but his ears flicked every time Owen shifted, as if tracking the child's heartbeat too. Grace took a careful sip of coffee. Her hands were steadier today, but her eyes weren't. Ethan sat in the booth opposite them, leaving space like a courtesy. He didn't ask where they slept. He didn't ask why the bruises. Questions were a net. Some people needed warmth before they could climb out. The diner doorbell chimed. Grace stiffened. Owen's shoulders rose. It was only a man in a knit cap, stomping snow off his boots, but the fear didn't ease right away. It took Grace a full breath to let her spine loosen. Ethan saw it. Rex saw it too. The dog's gaze remained fixed on the entrance long after the man had sat down. Ethan leaned forward slightly. "Someone's looking for you." Grace's eyes dropped to the table. Her fingers tightened around the mug. "I know." That was all she said. A minute later, the black SUV rolled past the diner. Slow. Smooth. Too slow to be normal. The driver never looked directly at the window, but Ethan had seen that trick before. You don't have to look to take inventory, you just have to know your angles. Rex's head turned, following the SUV's movement, muscles firming under his coat. Ethan kept his voice low. "If you're in trouble, you don't have to explain everything. But you should let me help you get somewhere safer." Grace's throat worked. "We can't go to a shelter." "Why?" She hesitated just long enough for the answer to be obvious. Powerful people could reach places ordinary people thought were safe. Owen's voice came out small. "He always finds us." Grace's eyes snapped to her son, alarmed. "Owen!" "It's true," the boy said, then clamped his mouth shut like he'd broken a rule. Ethan didn't press. He looked at Grace, and something in his expression softened. Not pity. Respect. The recognition of someone fighting to keep a child breathing easy. "What do you need right now?" Ethan asked. Grace's lips parted, then closed. Her pride fought with her exhaustion. "Just a little time." Time was a luxury. Ethan knew that too. The doorbell chimed again. This time it was a woman Ethan hadn't seen before. Early 60s, short and sturdy, gray hair cut in a practical bob, cheeks pink from the cold. She wore a thick quilted coat and carried herself like she'd owned every room she walked into since 1985. Diane Keller, the diner owner. She approached Ethan's booth with a coffee pot, like it was a weapon disguised as hospitality. Her eyes flicked to Grace, then to Owen, then to Rex, then back to Ethan. "You're up early," Diane said, voice warm but sharp around the edges. "That dog of yours looks like he's working overtime." "Morning, Diane," Ethan said. Diane poured coffee without asking. "Morning. And you too," she added to Grace and Owen. Her smile was kind, but her gaze was a scanner. Grace nodded. "Thank you." Diane leaned in just enough to be heard by Ethan. "That SUV has done 2 passes, same one I saw yesterday. You want me to call someone?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "Not yet." Diane's brow lifted. "Yet. That's a word." Ethan glanced at the window. The street looked normal. That's what made it dangerous. He made a decision. Quiet. Fast. He stood, stretching his left knee carefully, then slid into the seat on Grace's side of the booth, placing his body between her and the window. It wasn't dramatic. It was geometry. A moving shield. Grace's eyes widened. "What are you doing?" "Buying you a few seconds," Ethan said. "If someone walks in, they'll see me first." Diane snorted softly. "You always were the type who blocks the wind for strangers." Ethan ignored the comment, but he felt the truth of it. A man entered then, mid-30s, clean-cut, wearing a dark pea coat and gloves. Same man as yesterday. Polite face. Dead eyes. He paused inside the doorway, scanning. Rex rose silently. Not aggressive, just present. A wall with a heartbeat. The man's gaze flicked to Rex, then to Ethan. He took a step forward. Ethan stood too. The diner went quieter. Even the griddle seemed to hush. The man smiled. "I'm looking for—" "You're not," Ethan said. The man's smile tightened. "Excuse me?" Ethan kept his voice calm, his stance relaxed but ready. "You walked in here yesterday. You've driven past twice today. You're not hungry. You're hunting. Take your coffee and go." The man's eyes sharpened. "You don't know who you're talking to." Ethan did know the type. The ones who thought intimidation was a credential. He lifted his chin just enough. "Former Navy SEAL," he said, not as a threat, but as a fact. "And you're making people afraid in a public place. Leave." For a moment, the man hesitated. Then Rex took one silent step forward, placing himself at Ethan's side, eyes locked on the man's hands. The man's gaze flicked to the dog again. His throat bobbed. He backed up half a step and forced a laugh that didn't sound real. "No trouble," he said, turning toward the counter as if he'd only meant to order coffee. Diane was already there, coffee cup ready like she'd rehearsed it. She slid it across without warmth. "To go," she said. The man took it, eyes lingering on Ethan like he was memorizing a face, then left. The doorbell chimed. The cold rushed in, then out. Grace exhaled shakily. Owen's fingers unclenched from his sleeves. Ethan sat back down slowly. "You can't keep sitting in the window," he said, voice gentle but firm. "It makes you easy to find." Grace stared at the table. "If we move, he wins." Ethan felt a flicker of anger, not at her, but at the shape of the world that forced a woman to think like that. Rex returned to the floor, but his gaze stayed on the door. His tail remained still, like a needle on a compass. Diane wiped her hands on her apron and leaned close again. "You want the back office?" she murmured. "I got a side exit. People forget it's there." Grace's head snapped up, hope and fear colliding in her eyes. Ethan nodded once. "Do it. Quietly." Diane gestured like she was just clearing dishes. Ethan rose first, positioning his body so Grace and Owen could slide out behind him. Rex moved with them, silent as snow. They reached the short hallway leading toward the back. And that's when Ethan heard it. The low growl of an engine outside, closer than before. Not passing, stopping. Ethan paused, listening. Rex's ears sharpened and his body tensed without sound. Grace clutched Owen's hand so tight the boy winced. Someone was getting out of that SUV. The side exit. Ethan stopped at the mouth of the hallway and listened. The engine outside wasn't fading. It idled with purpose, low and steady, like the driver wanted the whole block to know he was there. Milwaukee's winter pressed against the diner's back wall, wind scraping along brick and metal like fingernails. Inside, the hallway smelled of old paper towels and dish soap. Rex stood shoulder to knee with Ethan, black back rigid, tan muzzle lifted. His ears were needles pointed toward the rear door. He didn't bark. He didn't whine. He held tension the way a fuse holds fire. Grace's grip on Owen's hand tightened again. The boy's face pinched, but he didn't complain. His eyes were wide, fixed on Ethan, as if Ethan's decisions were the only thing between him and something terrible. Diane Keller appeared at the end of the hallway, moving fast for a woman in her 60s. Her coat was still on, apron still tied, eyes sharp. "Side exits through here," she whispered, nodding at the door marked "Employees Only." "Alley's clear most days. Not today." Ethan raised one hand, palm down. Stop. Breathe. He measured the hallway in his head like a corridor overseas. Distance, angles, choke points. A narrow passage, one rear door, one turn into the alley. Too easy to trap someone. Too easy to force a mistake. He leaned toward Diane. "Where's your back office window?" Diane blinked, then pointed. "Small one. Looks into the alley." "Why?" Ethan moved without rushing, careful on his left knee. He placed Grace and Owen behind the corner, out of line of sight from the rear door, using the wall like cover. His voice stayed low. "Grace, keep Owen behind you. No sudden moves. If anyone speaks to you, you don't answer. You watch me." Grace nodded, face pale, trying to be brave. She looked 35 on paper, but fear made her look younger and older at the same time. Her chestnut hair had loosened again, strands clinging to her cheeks. Her gray wool coat hung like it belonged to someone with a different life. The one sign of her nature, even now, was in her attempt at politeness. She kept wanting to apologize for needing help. Owen pressed his forehead briefly to her sleeve, as if anchoring himself. He was 8, slim, quiet, eyes too old for his face. Ethan's attention returned to Rex. "Stay," he murmured. Rex didn't move. His eyes did, tracking every sound, every shift of air. Ethan stepped into the back office. It was cramped. A desk with stacks of receipts, a security monitor that looked more decorative than useful, a narrow window half fogged with cold. Diane shoved aside a box of napkins, peering out with him. The alley was a strip of packed snow between brick walls. A dumpster, a slick patch of ice, a delivery door across the way. And at the mouth of the alley, angled just enough to block the exit, sat the black SUV. Driver's door opened. A man stepped out. Mid-30s, maybe late 30s. Tall, athletic, dressed for business in winter. Dark coat, gloves, clean shoes that didn't belong in an alley. His hair was neat, his face smooth, the kind that could smile at a fundraiser and threaten someone in the same breath. He wasn't the diner scout from before. This one carried himself like he had authority to be there. Behind him, another man emerged from the passenger side. Shorter, stockier, hands in pockets. He moved like he didn't care who saw him. Ethan watched their spacing. 2 men, one blocking the line out, one slightly behind, scanning the windows. They weren't random. They were a team. Diane's voice trembled with controlled anger. "Those your friends?" "No," Ethan said. "Those are hers." He exhaled slowly, the way he used to before breaching a doorway. Not because he wanted violence, because he wanted control. He stepped back into the hallway. Rex's ears flicked to him, reading his posture. "They're in the alley," Ethan said quietly. "Two of them, blocking your exit." Grace's mouth opened. No sound came out. Owen's fingers dug into her coat sleeve. Diane muttered something under her breath that sounded like a prayer mixed with a curse. Ethan's brain ran through options. Call police. Too slow. And if these men were connected to someone with power, police might arrive after Grace was already gone. Run out the front. The SUV could circle. Another vehicle might be waiting. Unknown variables. Stay inside. Safer for the moment. But if they forced entry? Ethan held up a hand again. Calm. "Diane," he said, "do you have a back door lock that holds?" Diane nodded. "Deadbolt, steel frame. Not perfect, but it's decent." "Good. Lock it. Then go to the front and keep the place normal. No panic. If they come in, you act like it's just business." Diane's eyes narrowed. "And you?" Ethan didn't answer yet. He looked at Grace. "Grace," he said softly. "Do you know them?" Grace swallowed hard. Her voice came out thin. "Not by name." That was enough. Ethan crouched slightly so he could see Owen's face without towering over him. "Owen, if I tell you to run, you run with Diane to the kitchen, okay? You don't stop. You don't look back." Owen nodded once, tight and brave. Ethan stood. His navy parka rustled, red and black flannel visible at the collar, faded jeans, brown boots planted firm. A man dressed like a working dad, but built like someone who'd carried weight in places most people never saw. Rex rose with him, silent. Ethan's voice to the dog was barely more than breath. "Stay close." Rex's tail remained still. His eyes were a steady fire. The rear door rattled. Not a gentle test. A firm tug. Then another. Diane hurried away, keys jingling, moving faster than fear. Grace pulled Owen behind her, but Ethan shifted positions, placing himself in the narrow hallway between the rear door and the booth corner where Grace and Owen stood. Geometry again. Body as barrier. The rear door rattled harder. A voice called through the metal. Friendly tone. Unfriendly intent. "Ma'am," the voice said, "we just want to talk. You don't need to hide." Grace flinched so sharply, Ethan saw it out of the corner of his eye. Her eyes flooded, panic rising like water. Ethan kept his voice calm, loud enough to carry. "Wrong door," he said. "This is a diner, not a meeting room." A pause. Then the voice again, colder now. "Step aside. This isn't your problem." Ethan's jaw tightened. The same line, in different uniforms, in different cities, over and over. Men who thought power made them untouchable. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't posture. He simply answered, "It is now." The rear door slammed once. A shoulder check. Metal groaned. Rex's body tensed, but he still didn't bark. His ears pinned forward, eyes locked on the door seam, watching for hands, for feet, for movement. Ethan adjusted his stance. Left knee slightly back to protect it. Weight balanced, hands open and ready. The way he'd been trained. The way he'd survived. The door shuddered again, then stopped. Silence filled the hallway. Ethan waited. A soft scrape came from the side of the building. Snow shifting. Footsteps. They weren't trying to break in anymore. They were moving. Ethan's eyes flicked to Diane's back office window through the open doorway. The men were walking along the brick, toward the diner's front. A new plan. Ethan's pulse stayed steady. That was the point. Panic was what they wanted. He leaned toward Grace, voice low and controlled. "They're coming through the front. You keep your head down. Owen stays behind you. No talking." Grace nodded, tears clinging to her lashes. Ethan turned to Rex. "Watch hands," he murmured. Rex's gaze snapped toward the front hallway. Then the diner's bell chimed. The sound was small, innocent, and Ethan felt the air change like the moment before a storm breaks. The name behind the SUV. The diner bell chimed again, bright and harmless. Ethan felt it like a trigger. Two men stepped in from the cold, shaking snow from their shoulders as if they owned warmth. The first looked late 30s, tall, clean jaw, hair combed with the kind of care meant to impress judges. His dark overcoat fit too well for Milwaukee's slush. The second was shorter and thicker through the chest, early 40s, close-cropped hair, eyes that never stopped moving. Both wore gloves. Both scanned the room in practiced slices. Rex rose without a sound. Not aggressive, just present. Ethan shifted one step so his body blocked the line to Grace's booth. Navy parka, red and black plaid flannel at the collar, faded jeans, brown boots planted wide enough to be steady without looking like a fight invitation. His left knee stayed protected behind him. The taller man smiled politely, the way someone smiled before asking for something they had no right to take. "Morning," he said. "We're looking for a woman. A wellness situation. We don't want trouble." Diane Keller behind the counter kept her voice light. "If you're ordering, order. If you're not, you're blocking the door." The shorter man's eyes slid to Rex, then to Ethan. He didn't like the dog. That was obvious. He didn't like the way the dog watched hands. The taller man produced a phone, held it up with a photo displayed. Ethan caught the image in a quick glance. Grace, dressed in something elegant, hair done, smile practiced. A different life. Grace's breath hitched behind Ethan. Owen made a small sound in his throat and pressed into her coat like he wanted to disappear inside it. The taller man's tone stayed smooth. "Ma'am, your family is concerned. They've been searching. We can resolve this quietly." Ethan didn't move. "You have a warrant?" The smile didn't crack, but it thinned. "Sir, we don't need—" "Yes," Ethan said, calm as ice. "You do." The shorter man took one step closer. Rex took one step too, placing himself exactly where the man would have to pass. No bark, no teeth. Just that steady, amber gaze, locked on the man's hands as if the dog already knew what those hands could do. The shorter man stopped. His jaw flexed. Ethan kept his voice low, measured. "You can talk to the police outside. You don't approach a frightened mother and a child in a public diner." The taller man's eyes sharpened. "You don't know what you're interfering with." Ethan did. He'd seen the pattern in other uniforms. Pressure first, fear second, isolation third. A story written for someone else's benefit. "I know enough," Ethan said. "Leave." For a beat, the diner felt like it had gone quiet on purpose. Even the griddle hiss sounded softer. Diane's regulars kept their eyes down, but their shoulders were tense, listening. Grace's voice came out behind him, small and raw. "Ethan." He didn't turn his head. He didn't want to expose her to their eyes. "Stay where you are," he murmured. The taller man took a breath, then tried a different angle. "This isn't about you," he said. "This is about Mr. Holloway's family. The child." Grace made a sound like pain. Not loud. Worse. It was the sound of someone recognizing the name of the storm that ruined her roof. Ethan filed it away. Holloway. The taller man continued, voice still polished. The child belongs with his father. The mother is not well. That's what the court will say. Ethan's chest tightened, anger rising in a controlled line. He didn't let it show. Funny, Ethan said. You talk about court, but you show up with muscle, not paperwork. The shorter man's eyes flicked to the hallway that led toward the back. He was mapping exits. Planning. Ethan followed that glance and adjusted his stance half an inch, taking away an angle without making it obvious. Diane lifted the phone behind the counter. I'm calling the police, she said, cheerful as sunshine. Smile for the camera. The taller man's expression changed at last. A flash of irritation, quick and ugly, then smoothed back into control. No need, he said. We'll step outside. He turned slowly, like he was doing Ethan a favor. But as he moved, his gaze landed on Ethan with a cold promise. Walk away, sir. People like you don't get rewarded for hero acts. Ethan didn't answer. The two men left. The bell chimed again, and the cold rushed in and out. Through the window, the black SUV's brake lights glowed red against the snow. Rex stayed standing for a moment, ears forward, eyes fixed on the street, until the vehicle rolled away with deliberate slowness. Only then did the dog settle back down, still watching the door. Grace exhaled like she'd been holding her breath since yesterday. Ethan finally turned toward her. Up close, her fear looked like exhaustion. 35, slim, face drawn tight around cheekbones, chestnut hair escaping its tie. Her gray wool coat was frayed at the cuff. The bruise at her wrist was more visible now that her sleeve had shifted. And still, even shaking, she tried to keep her voice polite. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean to bring this to you. Ethan's expression softened, not into sentiment, but into certainty. You didn't bring it. They did. Owen's eyes were fixed on Ethan, wide and wet. They'll take us, he said. Ethan crouched slightly so he was level with the boy. Not today. The words were simple. The promise behind them was not. Diane came around the counter, wiping her hands on her apron like she was preparing for war. Okay, she said. What's the plan, Navy boy? Ethan's mind was already moving. He didn't want to keep Grace in a predictable place. He didn't want her walking out into the open. He wanted information, time, and a safer position. He nodded toward the back office. We hold them here for 5 minutes, he said. Then we move. Grace blinked. Move where? Ethan didn't lie. Somewhere they can't predict. Somewhere with cameras and witnesses. He pulled his phone from his pocket and typed one name. Holloway, Milwaukee. The results loaded fast. A headline. A photo. Grace Holloway, philanthropic board member, wife of billionaire Bennett Holloway. Ethan's jaw tightened. Wealth didn't change fear, but it changed how people hunted. Below it, another link. Concern grows as prominent socialite missing with son. A story with a smiling family photo and a carefully worded plea for privacy. The kind of article that hid a cage behind velvet. Ethan glanced up. Grace's face had gone paper white. You're his wife, Ethan said quietly. Grace's eyes glistened. She didn't nod. She didn't shake her head. Her silence confirmed everything. He hurts you, Ethan said, not a question. Grace's lips parted, and for a second she looked like she might finally speak. Then she glanced at Owen, and swallowed the words back down like they were poison. Ethan understood. Some truths were too heavy to say in front of a child. He tapped another number. Diane watched him, expression sharp. A voice answered on the second ring. "Officer Brooks." Officer Tyler Brooks sounded tired but alert, the voice of a man who'd seen too much at night. When he arrived 10 minutes later, he matched the voice. 39, solid build, a narrow scar cutting through one eyebrow, dark hair under his cap, eyes that measured rooms the way Ethan did. His uniform was crisp, his face controlled, and one tell of his personality was in the way he spoke to Owen first, softly, before he spoke to any adult. "Hey, buddy," Brooks said. "You safe right now?" Owen nodded, swallowing hard. Brooks looked at Ethan. "You called about men making contact." Ethan kept it brief. "They used the name Holloway. They had a photo. They tried to force a conversation." Brooks's gaze flicked to Grace, then to Rex, then back. "That's not a wellness check," he said quietly. "That's a retrieval." Grace's shoulders trembled. Brooks lowered his voice. "Ma'am, if you're who I think you are, this is bigger than a diner. People will be looking, not just here." Ethan felt a cold line run down his spine. Brooks wasn't warning her. He was warning him, too. Ethan stepped closer to Grace, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel she wasn't alone. For the first time, her eyes met his fully. There was fear there, yes, but also something else. A fragile kind of trust. Brooks's radio crackled at his shoulder. He glanced down at it, then away, as if weighing how much truth to say out loud. "We need to move you," he said. "Now." Ethan's phone vibrated in his hand. A text from an unknown number. Only 5 words. "Walk away. We know where you sleep." Ethan didn't show it on his face. He only tightened his grip on the phone and looked at the diner window, half expecting the SUV to reappear. Outside, snow kept falling, soft as silence. And somewhere in it, someone was watching, waiting for Ethan to make a mistake. Warmth, witnesses, and the quiet choice. Officer Brooks didn't waste time. He guided Grace and Owen into the back office first, away from windows, away from curious eyes. Diane Keller locked the front door with a casual flip of the sign, as if she were closing early for plumbing. Outside, snow continued to fall like the city was trying to erase footprints. Ethan's phone still buzzed in his palm. "Walk away. We know where you sleep." He didn't show it to Grace. Fear was contagious. He kept his face steady, the way he'd learned to do when panic wanted to spread like fire. Brooks looked at Ethan's posture and read the change anyway. "You got a threat?" Ethan gave a single nod and showed him the screen. Brooks's jaw tightened. "That's escalation." Rex stood near the office door, black and tan coat still, amber-brown eyes scanning the hallway. He didn't look frightened. He looked focused, like he had chosen his job and would finish it. Brooks spoke in a low tone, crisp and controlled. "Here's what we're not doing. We're not driving her straight to a shelter. We're not going to any address tied to her name. And we're not heading to your apartment." Grace's voice trembled. "Then where do we go?" Ethan answered before Brooks could. "A place with cameras, witnesses, and routine traffic. Somewhere they can't claim you vanished again." Diane raised an eyebrow. "You mean somewhere loud?" "Somewhere normal," Ethan said. "Normal is protection when predators want isolation." Brooks made a quick call, turning his shoulder, voice clipped. He wasn't calling for a full squad. He was calling for the right person at the right time without broadcasting it. Then he looked at Ethan. There's a family court building 2 miles from here. Public lobby. Cameras. Officers. No private backroom games. Grace flinched. He has lawyers. Good, Brooks said. So do you, if you'll let us build the right record. Ethan glanced at Grace, keeping his tone gentle. You don't have to tell everything today, but you do need to be seen. On camera. With your son. Choosing to be safe. Grace's eyes filled. She nodded once, small. Okay. Ethan turned to Diane. Can you keep the diner closed 10 more minutes? Diane snorted. Honey, I can close this place for a year if I want. Go. They moved in a tight, quiet sequence. Brooks went first, checking the hallway and rear door. Ethan followed, placing himself between Grace and the most exposed angles. Grace kept Owen close, one hand on his shoulder, one in his mittened grip. Rex flowed beside Ethan, silent, alert, head moving in small increments as if measuring every sound in the building's bones. At the side exit, Brooks paused and listened. No engine. No footsteps. Ethan's eyes flicked to the alley. Empty, but that didn't mean safe. Snow hid tracks. Snow softened sound. Brooks opened the door just enough to scan. His movements were careful, economical, like he'd practiced them for years. He stepped out, looked both ways, then motioned. Now. They crossed the alley fast, not running, not panicking, just moving with purpose. Ethan's left knee pulled as he stepped over an icy ridge, but he kept his pace even. Rex's paws found the ice with quiet confidence. Brooks's patrol car waited around the corner, not in front of the diner. Another small choice. Another layer. Grace slid into the back seat with Owen. Ethan didn't. He looked at Brooks. They know where I live. Brooks held his gaze. Then you don't go home. Not tonight. Ethan's instinct was to argue. Habit. Pride. The belief that he could handle his own risk. But he caught himself. He remembered what Grace had said, in different words. Sometimes accepting help was courage. Ethan nodded once. Understood. Brooks pulled away smooth and steady, taking routes that didn't stay straight for long. Right turns, left turns, a loop past a busy intersection. He watched mirrors, not anxiously, but like a man reading a book he'd read before. Ethan watched too, scanning reflections in storefront windows, checking for the black SUV's shape. Rex sat in the back with Grace and Owen, posture calm, head up. Owen's fingers had finally relaxed. He leaned slightly toward Rex, as if the dog's steadiness gave him permission to breathe. They reached the county building just after the morning rush thickened. People in parkas and scarves moved in and out. Security cameras glinted under fluorescent lights. The lobby smelled like wet wool and paper. Brooks parked near the entrance, where cameras were obvious. This is not a hiding place, he said. This is a statement. Inside, Ethan took the lead without drawing attention. He moved like a man who knew how to pass through crowds without being swallowed by them. He kept Grace on the inside of the group, Owen in the middle, Rex nearest the outer edge, watching hands, watching corners. At the security desk, Brooks spoke to an officer he knew. Quick exchange, no drama. A nod, a glance at Grace's face. Then the officer's eyes softened. Ma'am, the officer said quietly, we can get you into a safe interview room. Grace swallowed, shoulders trembling. "I don't want him to find us." "He won't," Brooks said, firm. "Not here. Not today." Ethan stayed with her until she was seated and Owen had a cup of water in his hands. Rex lay down at Owen's feet, head up, eyes half-lidded but awake. The dog didn't need commands. He understood the mission. A woman approached then, early 50s, sharp features, hair pulled into a sleek bun. She wore a navy coat that looked expensive but practical, and her eyes held a steady intelligence. She moved like someone who had spent a lifetime walking into rooms where power tried to intimidate her. "Ava Linton," she said, offering a hand to Grace first. "I'm a family law attorney. Officer Brooks called." Grace stared like she couldn't believe help could show up so fast. I don't have..." Ava cut her off gently. "You have a child. That's enough." Ethan watched Grace's face change in tiny degrees. Fear didn't vanish, but it shifted, making room for something else. Relief. Possibility. Ava lowered her voice. "We'll file an emergency protective order. We'll document threats. We'll create a clean timeline that a judge can't ignore. And we'll do it without letting him twist the narrative." Grace's eyes flooded. She nodded. "He's going to say I'm unstable." Ava's expression remained calm. "Let him. Facts are steadier than money." Ethan's phone vibrated again. Unknown number. This time the message was shorter. "Last warning." Ethan showed it to Brooks without a word. Brooks's eyes hardened. He stepped aside, spoke into his radio, voice precise. Ethan didn't hear all of it. He only caught the tone. This wasn't going away. But now, it was recorded. Ava asked Grace for basics: name, dates, where she'd been sleeping. Grace hesitated, then spoke, voice shaking but clear. She didn't give every detail, not yet, but she gave enough to build a first wall. Owen watched her like he'd never seen his mom talk without flinching. His eyes glistened, and he wiped them fast with his sleeve like it was embarrassing. Ethan crouched beside him, careful of his knee. "You did good," he said softly. Owen looked at him, then at Rex. He doesn't even bark," Owen whispered, almost amazed. Ethan's mouth twitched. "He saves his voice for when it matters." Owen nodded, small smile appearing for the first time. Hours passed. Forms, statements, a judge's signature on an emergency order, a plan for temporary housing that wasn't tied to Grace's name, a schedule for follow-up. When they finally stepped back into the cold, it felt different. Still winter, still biting, but not suffocating. Brooks handed Grace a copy of the order. "This is a shield," he said. "Not perfect, but real." Grace's hands shook as she held it. Then she looked at Ethan, and her voice broke. "You didn't have to do any of this." Ethan stood in his navy parka, flannel collar visible, snow gathering on his shoulders. His eyes were tired but steady. "Yes," he said simply. "I did." Grace let out a laugh that sounded like a sob and a relief all at once. "I don't even know how to thank you." Ethan glanced down at Owen, then at Rex. "Take care of him," Ethan said. "That's thanks enough." Owen stepped forward then, hesitant, and held out a folded napkin. The same kind diners used. He'd drawn on it with a borrowed pen. A picture of 4 shapes under falling snow. A man in a coat, a woman holding a boy's hand, and a dog, ears up, standing like a guardian. Ethan took it carefully, like it was something fragile and holy. Grace's eyes shone. "He draws when he's scared," she whispered. "He hasn't drawn in weeks." Ethan swallowed past the tightness in his throat. "Guess he feels safe," he said. Diane Keller's diner wasn't far, and before leaving, Grace insisted on going back for 1 minute. Not to hide, to thank. They walked in together, daylight behind them, people turning their heads. Diane's face softened when she saw Owen's small smile. "Well," Diane said, hands on hips, "look at that! The whole town decided to grow a spine." Grace stepped closer, voice shaking. "Thank you." Diane waved her off. "Buy a bowl of soup when you're ready. That's how we do gratitude here." It was a small, warm moment in a cold city. Outside, snow kept falling, but the black SUV didn't return. Not today. Grace stood on the sidewalk with Owen, and for the first time, she didn't scan the street like a hunted animal. She looked at Ethan instead, really looked, as if memorizing the face of someone who had pulled her out of a storm. Ethan felt something unfamiliar stir under all that discipline. Not weakness, not distraction. Hope. Rex leaned lightly against Ethan's leg, steady as a promise. And in the winter air, surrounded by a diner owner who didn't flinch, a cop who chose the right fight, and a lawyer who spoke like a shield, Ethan realized something he hadn't expected. Kindness wasn't small. It was a force. Some winter mornings feel like the world was built to test the heart. A locked door, a black SUV idling too long, a mother gripping her child like prayer made flesh. And then, one quiet man chooses to stand in the gap. Maybe that is how God works most often, not with thunder, but with timing. With a warm plate set down without judgment. With a stranger who refuses to look away. With a loyal German shepherd who doesn't need a command to know where danger lives, who watches the door like a guardian sent ahead. Ethan Cole did not carry a cape. He carried discipline, patience, and the kind of courage that stays calm when fear gets loud. And Rex, steady as a promise, reminded everyone that love can be fierce without being cruel. If you've ever felt cornered by life, remember this. A single act of mercy can become a miracle. And sometimes protection arrives on 4 paws, right when hope is running low. Share if you believe in angels with paws. Comment Amen to bless our veterans. Subscribe for the next story.